At the end of last year, I splurged on several American-made boots that I'd heard great things about. Nicks, Whites, Alden, Oak Street, and Truman. Since then, I've moved into a cardboard box under the bridge, but I have some of the best footwear in the world. I've broken all of these boots in and I've given them each their fair share of foot time, which has actually been quite the endeavor. Breaking in a pair of Whites the moment you finish breaking in a pair of Nicks, it's stupid. But we're not here to talk about those brands. We're here to talk about Truman Boot Company. I picked up their Java Wax Flesh cap toe boot and I'm excited to dive into the details with you. Let's start with the style. I gotta say right off the bat, I love the style of the Truman cap toe on their 79 last. I haven't worn their other lasts. This is my only boot from Truman so far, but the 79 is my ideal balance between a slim look with a little more mature and rugged bulk to it. Take a look at the toe box here compared to the Thursday Captain, the Red Wing Iron Ranger, and the Nicks Americana. In my younger days, I was all about that super slim look, which is why my first good pair of boots was the Thursday Captain. But the farther I get away from 30 years old, the more I appreciate a little bit of heft. Compared to the Iron Ranger, the Java Wax Flesh is about as wide at the waist, which is kind of this middle part, but instead of having the bump toe last, it's flatter on top and it definitely tapers toward the end. Now, if you compare this to the Nicks Americana, the toe on the Truman is much slimmer, which makes the boot look a lot less stubby overall. I'm a big fan of the natural leather welt, midsole, and heel. I think the contrast between the dark waxed leather and the natural accents is awesome, especially when paired with the lighter brown stitching in the upper and that crisp white stitch around the welt. One final thing I really appreciate about the style of Truman boots, they're immediately recognizable. It's sort of like when you hear Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix play guitar, you know it's them just like within 2 seconds of hearing the song. I think Truman's designs are a lot like that. They're unique to the brand, and when you see someone wearing a pair of Trumans out there, you immediately recognize them. Truman Boot Company's specialty is their leather selection, and a lot of their leathers come from either Horween or CF Stead. The Java Wax Flesh is a vegetable tanned waxed rough out leather from Horween, and it's almost black at first glance. Over time, the wax does dissipate and it kind of reveals this chocolatey, napped rough out leather. It shows through and it looks really, really cool. This leather is as tough as it gets. Rough out is already plenty rugged and it's really easy to care for, but you add that layer of wax on there and it just gives the water resistance of this boot a total boost. There's a lot of structure in the toe and the heel, and the leather is quite stiff out of the box. Actually took a little while to loosen up the leather, but once it's broken in the waist, which is this part right here, it feels comfortable, but the toe and the heel, those stay sturdy. From what I can see, this is a 6-ounce leather, which is over 2 millimeters thick, closer to 2.5 millimeters. And that's some pretty beefy leather, pun intended. I'd say enjoy the wax upper while the wax is still there. There's not really much you can do to return this boot back to its original look, which is like pretty close to this. You know, once the wax starts to go, nobody can really replace it. So the boot is definitely made to age, and I think the beauty is in how it patinas, and when that rough out texture starts to show through, that's the main point of this boot. I'm not gonna treat this leather for a few years. The more I spend with boots, the more I realize I like how the leather takes on oils and dirt and it just ages naturally without any care. If these boots ever do need conditioning, a coat of Bic 4 will do. It's just something that it's not gonna change the color of the rough out, and it's not really heavy enough to change the texture either. There was some break-in time required before these boots became fully comfortable, but it wasn't too bad. The Java Wax Flesh leather is quite stiff, and the waist of the boot was a little snug at first, right in here, but once that leather loosened up in that area, the boots became easier to slip on and off, and my foot had some breathing room. The Truman Java Wax Flesh now features a 270-degree Goodyear storm welt with a leather insole and midsole, finished off with a thick tread commando sole. All the components of the sole make this boot a very heavy boot, which I personally like. I know some guys aren't fans of heavy boots, but usually the heavier the boot, the more natural and long-lasting materials are actually in the core of the boot. These boots also have a steel shank. I'd say the arch is flatter than on Nicks and Whites, but you're getting a little more arch support than, say, Red Wing. This commando sole is awesome. It's heavy duty, the lugs are thick enough to have plenty of grip in any condition. I've only gotten a good chance to wear these in the warmer months, so I haven't had to trudge through any snow, but I have no doubt that they perform well on slick cement. I have a pair of Grantstone brass boots that have a very, very similar commando sole. Wore those in the snow and did really well. So I'm a 10.5D on a Brannock device. I picked up the Truman boots in 10D, and I think they fit well throughout my entire foot. I've said this before, but the 79 last, this shape right here, it felt a little snug at the waist of my foot. That is this mid part. So if you have a wider foot like an E, I recommend bumping up to the double E width, especially for the 79 last. For me, a few weeks of breaking in the boot was enough to where they felt comfortable. They're still a little snug, but the toes and heel fit well, so I'm not worried about it. Plus, I think they have more stretching to go before these are fully broken in. If you're worried about the slimmer last, you can also look at their 20 last in the Java Wax Flesh boots. The toe is more pronounced and wider, plus there's a little more room throughout the entirety of the boot. I think the 20 last isn't so different than the 79 last that you'd need a different size, but if you're on the border between sizes, checking out the slightly roomier 20 last could be a good option for you. If you want to go all the way and get one of the sturdiest boots ever made, then definitely check out the Nicks Americana in the brown waxed flesh. I do prefer the slimmer thinner look of the Truman, but those who like more width in the toe box, they might like the fit of the Nix better. The Americana here is made with double row stitched down construction and has a ton of arch support. It's probably the most hardcore boot I've ever tried. Grantstone is another brand you might like if you're interested in Truman Boot Company. Grantstone has excellent construction quality and their boots run about $100 less expensive than Truman. I'd say that Trumans have more of that Pacific Northwest workwear heritage look behind them, and Grantstone has more of the East Coast Alden American legacy feel to them. That might not mean anything to you, so I'm gonna break it down this way. Grantstone boots are just as well crafted, but the upper leathers, they're less like rugged. You're gonna find classic leathers like Horween Chrome Excel for most of their popular boots. A cool thing about both brands is that both Truman and Grantstone, they do have more exotic leathers, like you can get shrunken bison for the Trumans or kangaroo leather for some Grantstone. This right here is the Diesel, and I think this is a pretty good alternative to Truman Boot Company if you're interested. A lot of guys look to Nix and Whites as the pinnacle of boots, and I know I have a lot of subscribers here. I've seen some comments where people are still saving up for their first pair of those Northwestern beauties. But there's a middle ground between good quality American boots like Red Wing and those Grail boots that are north of $600. That middle ground is Truman Boot Company. I really like my Java Wax Flesh boots with the 79 last. They're slim but rugged. The leather is thick and basically indestructible. The sole has tons of grip, and the midsole and insole are loaded with vegetable tan leather. You should have some patience if you're gonna order Trumans. Mine took 7 weeks to arrive. They tell you that up front, but just expect the same, 7 weeks. They say 6 to 8. That's exactly where mine was. Other than that, Truman Boot Company is boot making at its finest. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below. You can also check out some of my other boot reviews popping up right here. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, put your best boot forward.